Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Okay, it's time to begin. Let's start a countdown. 20, 19, 18, 17. I just start the song.
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. Thanks for joining me today. This hour, Joe Dallas is with me. He is not only an author, but he is a speaker and ordained pastoral counselor. He directs a biblical counseling ministry for those dealing with sexual-related problems and their families as well. He's authored many books. Always glad to have him on. I love his perspective and his boldness and his kindness and clarity, and just a fun guy to talk to. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Bill, how you doing?
I'm good. Now, I do want to preface this will probably be a little bit of a sensitive topic today, and this is one of those issues that I think creates a lot of controversy, but I want to talk with you because you're an expert on this, and I want to talk about conversion therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You open for that?
I'm open for it.
Okay.
Let's dig in since we're talking sensitive topics. Sure.
Yeah. But when I go to a counselor, if I was a person that was confused, why wouldn't you be able to give me the best counseling available on a topic? I mean, in Minnesota, you're not allowed to have this kind of discussion with someone who walks into an office. I don't know if that's the same way in California.
Well, we're getting there.
Okay.
I think we're behind Minnesota, but we'll catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, look, Bill, let me play devil's advocate for a minute here and speak even against myself and my own interest. The American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association, they have a responsibility to clarify standards of mental health and then to scrutinize whether or not people who are counselors are operating within those standards.
Wow.
I get that, and it makes sense to me. And if they determine that someone is doing something as a practitioner, which is harmful psychologically to people, then they have the right and even the responsibility to step in and say, that's wrong. And then to even encourage the government to say, look, this person is practicing something that is damaging to individuals, just like if a doctor is behaving like a quack and doing things that are verifiably damaging, the American Medical Association has every right to blow the whistle and say, hey, this needs to be stopped any way it can be stopped because lives are being damaged. So that I get. Now, here's the big question, though. Is it verifiably damaging? Because the burden of proof is on the individual bringing the accusation. And as you said, if you as an individual go to a practitioner and say, I have certain feelings, if I give in to these feelings, it will violate my conscience. Can you help me deal with these feelings? That's a pretty reasonable thing to ask from a counselor, unless it can be proven that denying those feelings would be damaging to you. Now, let me be ridiculous for a minute here. Suppose you were very anorexic and you said, I feel like eating, but I don't want to give in to that feeling. Can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
A responsible counselor is going to say, there's nothing wrong with the desire to eat food. In fact, you should. You will die if you don't. So the counselor will, in that case, override your worldview or your belief or whatever and say, hey, guy, you need to eat. It's in your best interest to do so. Now, should that same approach apply to sexual feelings? I would argue it should not, because there are many people who believe that to give in to homosexual desire would be a violation of their most profoundly held beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, in my opinion, Bill, it would be psychologically damaged to give in to those feelings. Now, full disclosure, you know me, I'm a born-again, Bible-believing Christian. I do believe homosexuality falls short of God's will and thereby is a sin. I do not believe God intends anyone to give in to homosexual desires. But having said that, I know that if people don't hold the same belief about homosexuality that I hold, they certainly should be free to engage in an adult to adult homosexual relationship, even though I do not believe that's God's will. That is their own business, should they choose to do so. But if an individual wants to learn how to manage those feelings so as not to give in to them because they do not comport with his beliefs, he should have the same right to make that decision, just like I did. Man, in 1984, I realized, hey, I, as a born again believer, cannot continue engaging in sexual relationships with men. No matter how loving or monogamous the relationship may be, I don't believe it's what God intended, and I'm making a conscious choice to go with my beliefs over my feelings. I had the right to seek out a counselor who could align with those beliefs and help me achieve my goal. And because I did find such a counselor, at least a large part of the reason for the direction my life went was because I found such a counselor. I did, in fact, 3 years after I made that decision, marry the woman I've been married to for 38 years now and raised two grown sons with and lived a life with and fully intend to die with if the Lord doesn't come first. So I had that right just as surely as any openly gay man has the right to live his life out as he sees fit. And this is where I think the conversion therapy controversy hits it's where the rubber meets the road on this issue. Do individuals have the right to self-determination so long as that decision they make towards self-determination is not verifiably damaging? That, I think, is the crux of the issue. And in that sense, I think these bans on so-called conversion therapy are completely wrong. So there's my position on this.
Mm-hmm. Joe Dallas is my guest. Joe, would you take us back, if you can, to some of those counseling sessions when it was 1984 and you got this wonderful counseling that brought you to a different place? Can you share, or is that inappropriate of me to ask what happened in those
It's
sessions?
not inappropriate at all. I'd be glad to. And I want to tell you first what a comedy it turned out to be, because this wonderful therapist who I found, he was a great guy, first name Dave, I'll leave it at that. But Dave was a licensed marriage and family child counselor in the state of California. I contacted him, told him my goals. He said, fine, I will do all I can to help you achieve those goals. And he did. It was only about 15 years later that I found out I was the first person he had ever dealt with, ever, who was dealing with homosexuality.
Okay.
And I said, well, man, for a novice, you sure were good. And it was nice to be your guinea pig, you
Okay.
know? But all he did was he said, okay, Joe, let's look at the fact that you have feelings you didn't ask for. I don't want you to be ashamed of those feelings. I don't want you to feel that you should beat yourself up for having those feelings. They are part of what we call the sin nature. Okay, fine. And he helped me understand that the sin nature, that's what we're all born with. We all know, according to Romans especially, and of course the third chapter of Genesis, that's the lot of all human beings. And the feelings we have that are inherited with that sin nature, some of them are experienced universally, like all of us know what it's like to be tempted to punch somebody out, okay?
Mm-hmm.
There are some that are experienced only by the minority. That would be like homosexuality or maybe feelings like sadomasochism or, who knows what. But the point is, some are experienced by a minority. In all cases, they are involuntary. It doesn't mean they're inborn. It just means that they are part of the sinful nature we inherited from Adam. And that is why we have to be born again. Nobody is righteous enough to come into the kingdom of God unless they're born again. And then having been born again, we are sanctified from glory to glory by the Spirit of God. And part of that sanctification means learning how to manage the feelings that we have at all levels, including the sexual. He helped me understand that, okay, you're not going to be ashamed of having these feelings, but it's not inevitable that you give in to them. Now, let's look at under what circumstances they tend to be the most inflamed. And we started looking at my porn habit, which I weaned myself off of. Then we started exploring some of the emotional needs I was trying to meet through homosexual encounters, and I found in my case that was profoundly helpful. because the more I understood some of the legitimate emotional needs I was trying to meet through my sexual behavior, the easier it was not only to abstain from that behavior, which I'd already decided to do, but to pursue in healthy ways the kind of male to male intimacy that involved friendship and brotherhood and affirmation that I believe all men need from other men, just as all women need that from other women. And I found that the more I pursued that, the easier it was to resist homosexual temptations when they came up. Then we talked about temptation management. What do you do when you're stimulated? What decisions do you make? How do you separate yourself from sources that tended to trigger you towards that behavior? So those were all, and then, my gosh, we spent a long time talking about family dynamics. That was very helpful for me, understanding how, in my case, early molestation, which was tragic but happened when I was 8 years old, combined with some very unhealthy dynamics in my family, helped set me up for sexual confusion.
Hmm.
Now, Bill, let me be quick to do a disclaimer here because a lot of people hear this and go, oh, now I understand why my son's gay. No, wait a minute. No, my story is my story. Not every person who is attracted to the same sex has the same story. So I don't believe there's ever just one reason that applies to all people that causes them to become homosexual. But in my case, those were the dynamics that we explored in my counseling session. And for me, Bill, that was life changing.
Yeah.
It really was. And it freed me up to pursue because at first my decision was just to abstain. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. As Christians, we're called to abstain from all kinds of things, aren't we? That's what we call mortifying the flesh, saying no to our old nature. We should.
Hmm.
But he helped me, Dave helped me understand you don't have to just abstain, but now you can also pursue. Pursue healthy relationships, pursue healthy friendships. And then I came in one afternoon and said, Dave, I think I am interested in a young woman at my church. And he was such a smart man. He said, okay, let's take it easy here. He said, that's wonderful. But what I don't want you to do, Joe, is jump ahead and get into a heterosexual relationship if you're not ready for it. And he said, I strongly warn you, do not ever consider marriage unless you can say with integrity that you are sexually attracted to the woman you intend to marry, just not emotionally attracted.
Hmm.
Because he said, I have seen a lot of gay men make a friendship with a woman and think, oh, great, I'll marry her. And then they find that they really basically have a live-in friendship. That's not a marriage.
Hmm.
And I took that to heart. And I made it very clear to my wife, Renee, at the time I was dating her, that this is where I've been. This is my story. I will always be honest with you. And she said, well, let's see where this goes and we'll take it slow, which we did.
Mm.
But I think because of all that, I was allowed through the counseling I got to pursue what mattered to me according to my worldview. That is a basic right that every adult should have. And this again is why I get back to my belief that it's wrong to ban counseling for people who, of their own volition, are saying, I do not choose to give in to my homosexual desires. Can you help me explore my options in the healthiest and the most biblical way?
Hmm.
That's what I've done now for 38 years, and I've loved it, and I'll continue to do it regardless. But I think that we are at a time when the U.S. Supreme Court is considering what to do about bans on this kind of counseling, which do exist, as you said, in many states around the country and certainly in other countries around the world.
Hmm.
And I think what we have to consider is if a practice is not inherently destructive, then the government has no right to prohibit it. Now, if some people who engage in that practice do destructive things, of course, they should be censured or fined or have their licenses yanked or whatever. But the problem in cases like that is not the fact that they counsel people in conflict over homosexuality, but rather the way they counsel them, if they give them shock treatment or have them look at heterosexual pornography or do exotic things with them to make them turn straight, or if they make outlandish promises, come to me and I'll completely erase your homosexual desires and replace them with heterosexual ones. Well, all of that, I would say, is very irresponsible practicing, and I think that they should be censured for that. But again, that doesn't mean that all people who counsel in this area are guilty of doing something that is destructive. In fact, most of us, I believe, are not.
Hmm. Joe Dallas is my guest. We're going to take a break. And if you have a question or comment about what we're discussing today on conversion therapy, or if you have a loved one that is in the homosexual lifestyle that you have a question for Joe about, you can text the question or comment over to 877-933-2484. And during the break, you can go to joedallas.com, learn more about Joe. Be right back. We carry each other's burdens. Please know you can bring us your prayer concerns and we will pray. Share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio team by texting or calling 877-933-2484, or share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio staff and listeners at myfaithradio.com. My guest today is Joe Dallas. You can learn more about him at joedallas.com. He is an author and speaker and ordained pastoral counselor. He's written, I think, 6, 7 books, maybe 8. Joe, how many? What's the count right now?
Oh, actually 9, but who's counting?
Yeah, I'm not counting.
No, 9 books. Thank you for asking.
And you can learn all about the books, and they're all listed at joedallas.com. So we're talking today about conversion therapy. Maybe you would give us some more information about the U.S. Supreme Court case on this.
Yeah, this is quite a test case, really. Okay, there have been, like you said earlier, Bill, there are a number of states and a number of counties and cities that have banned different types of counseling that they call conversion therapy.
Okay.
It's a pejorative term. It really is. It's sort of like the term religious right.
Sure.
If you know. But at any rate, basically, any form of counseling for people who say, hey, I'm dissatisfied with the sexual desires I have, be they homosexual or bisexual or what have you, and I would like help because I need some Christian assistance in dealing with them. Can you help me? Okay. A number of cities and states have banned that kind of counseling outright, saying that it is dangerous. Now, in Colorado Springs, a licensed counselor named Kaylee Childs has challenged the Colorado Springs ban on that kind of therapy, saying, hey, you are telling me how I may or may not approach my own clients who come to me according to their worldview and according to mine, and that is a violation of my First Amendment rights and of free speech, and you're basically telling me what I may or may not say. And so she has taken that, and the Supreme Court has decided to hear that case, because it is a very foundational, the foundational question is, on the one hand, shouldn't people have the right to make the decision for themselves what kind of counseling they receive? On the other hand, don't organizations like the American Psychiatric Association have the right to determine what ethically their practitioners may do? Well, the answer to both those questions is yes, but it really, again, the burden of proof is on the accuser when they say that a particular type of counseling is damaging. They need to show in verifiable ways that it is. Now, let me be quick to say this. A lot of people who have gone to either church ministries to help people struggling with homosexuality, or counselors or psychologists or whatever, have said later, hey, I have decided that I'm gay and God made me that way, and I've come out as a gay man and I'm happy now. And that kind of counseling I now realize was damaging. So I'm sympathetic to a point, but I think on the other hand, if they, at the time they sought the counseling, were in agreement with the beliefs of the counselor, and then later they changed their beliefs, I don't think that's the counselor's fault. And I don't think that alone means the counseling was damaging. It's like people saying, well, I'm no longer a Christian, so I believe the Baptist church that I went to as a kid did me damage. I don't think that's fair. I think they had a change in worldview and they decided to go a different direction. So I think that the fact that somebody says, or they have anecdotal evidence, I don't think that is compelling. I think if a practice is damaging, you should be able to objectively verify that it is damaging. Like, if we want to get very extreme in our examples, Bill, a lobotomy, we would all agree, okay, that is a damaging, very extreme, even repugnant practice.
Mm-hmm.
But simple talk counseling for someone to help them explore their options as a Christian who is same-sex attracted and is determined not to give in to those attractions. I don't think any reasonable person would say that that is damaging in and of itself.
And I
So
would agree.
basically what the
Yeah.
controversy is going to be about. And like I said, I think that what if anybody is doing the kind of counseling that damages someone, I'll give you an example. If somebody came to me, like I said, say a young man came and said, I'm gay, I don't want to be gay, I want you to help me with these attractions, if I said, well, you have a demon, I'm going to cast it out of you, and you should be ashamed of yourself for feeling that way. Okay, you know what? I was a jerk. I did him damage.
Mm-hmm.
Probably left him feeling wounded. If I said, oh, yeah, come to me and I'll make your feelings completely vanish, that's an extreme, very sweeping promise to make. I don't think you should make a promise like that. If I said, oh, you're attracted to men, well, I know what the problem is. You must have been molested as a boy. Well, maybe he wasn't. And I might be implanting a memory of something that didn't even exist. Those are all unethical practices. But the fact that someone simply counsels someone confused about their sexuality doesn't mean that they are committing any of those unethical practices. So that's why I say, instead of just banning a form of counseling, take each case by case. If somebody has a complaint and says the counseling damaged me, look at the counseling sessions themselves to determine if they damaged the person rather than condemning an entire form of counseling.
Joe, how can a Christian counselor, I mean, if you're a Christian counselor, you're banned from having this ability to talk about a person's feelings and their sexual desires, and you can't have an influence in discussing that with them because you've been banned from conversion therapy, it seems like your hands are completely tied.
Well, in essence, they are. Of course, you can decide to simply say, I don't care what the standards and ethics are saying, I'm going to do it anyway. And if I lose my license, I lose my license. That's one option that some have taken. Others did what I did. I was originally training and studying and getting my degree in doing therapy as a California marriage family therapist licensed by the state of California. I switched tracks and went into pastoral biblical counseling rather than psychological counseling for that very reason, because that gives me the liberty to do this as a biblical counselor.
Hmm.
In other cases, the therapists are fighting. And this is where I have to say I admire Kaylee Childs for doing this. She is saying, I'm not going to give up my license, nor am I going to let my hands be tied. This isn't right. But I agree with you, Bill, at this point at least, if it's sort of like a teacher in a high school where the school is saying, you are going to have to either call a transgender student by his preferred pronoun or you're going to lose your position as a teacher. That's a terrible choice they have to make. And in some cases, they try to work with the principal to come to a reasonable compromise. In other cases, they just say, well, I'm not going to do it, so I guess you're going to have to fire me. That is a case where I think more and more we're going to find Christians are going to be they're going to find themselves with their backs against the wall, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe what a lot of us are going to have to do is reach a point of saying what Peter and John said, whether it's right in the sight of God to obey you or him, you decide. But as for me, I've decided I'm going to obey God rather than man. So if you fire me, you fire me. Now, that's easy for me to say because I'm not in that position. So I respect the Christian man who's trying to support a family and he's a counselor and the state tells him if you counsel this way, you lose your license. He may simply decide, well, then I will not counsel in the area of sexuality. I respect that. I understand why he's made that decision, and I do not think he's done anything morally wrong. But in other cases, I think some counselors, like, again, Ms. Childs, are going to challenge the system. And I believe that they should, because in this case, I can't help but say it plainly, Bill. I think a real serious injustice has been done for years now to different counselors and therapists when the system has told them what they must or must not believe or express when they're counseling people who hold a worldview that's similar to theirs but can't act on that view. To me, that just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Joe, I had a listener say that you gave the reason why you had homosexual tendencies. What are some other reasons that you see why people become or express their homosexual desires?
Golly, that's a good question because I maintain very adamantly that we don't know. I mean,
Okay.
there are a lot of cases I've seen, Bill, where I've worked with a man, just for example, many men who had wonderful relationships with their fathers, were never sexually violated, grew up in very healthy home environments, got along very well with their peers, no noticeable social or relational interruptions, and yet they still developed attractions to the same sex. So in some cases, it seems that there are things at work that we can't identify. I think in other cases, you've got there could be early trauma, there could be problems with a parent of the same sex, there could be problems relating to people of the same sex based on just a basic insecurity. Some boys grow up feeling as though they're not masculine enough for other boys, so they withdraw from normal friendships and they isolate, and yet they yearn for male intimacy, and that yearning at some point can become sexualized. I will tell you this for what it's worth, and this is speculation, okay? Because here, my rule of thumb is where the word of God is clear, be adamant. Where the word of God is not clear, hold your theories loosely. So I don't hold to any one theory on the development of homosexuality, but I do believe this. I do believe that while it is not inborn, I really don't believe it is. I think our temperament, our personality is inborn. It's our individual unique personality, just like our fingerprints. And some personalities are more susceptible to certain things later in life, which may account for the fact that so many homosexual people also happen to be artistic, very creative, you see. Um, I think that when I look at my own development, I was violated as a boy. I did have a very unsatisfactory relationship with my father. In my case, that led to a sexualized desire for male intimacy, and that spells homosexuality. But Bill, there are other boys who grew up, they were violated as boys. They had an unsatisfactory relationship with their dad, but they never in their life had a homosexual desire. What's the difference? In my case, I believe the temperament I was born with was made me susceptible to homosexuality if those other variables came into play. So one boy is born with a susceptibility to homosexuality if certain things happen in his life, whereas another boy, those things aren't going to affect his sexual desires at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a part of it. Like I said, there's all this debate about whether or not people are born gay. To this day, no verifiable evidence shows that they are. I've never said that it's impossible. I'm just saying that the facts don't support that. But I do think that the susceptibility to homosexuality may be something that is inborn if other factors come into play. So probably it's not one reason, it's a constellation of reasons. The inborn temperament we have, early family dynamics, early social experiences, and who knows what else.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take a break and come back more with Joe Dallas. Learn more about him at joedallas.com. If you have a question or comment, love to hear from you. 877-933-2484. I'm back with Joe Dallas, and we're talking today about conversion therapy. Joe, I don't know if I've asked you specifically, do you, I assume you do conversion therapy in your practice?
I counsel people who are in conflict
Okay.
with their sexual desires. I'm not going to take that label conversion therapy because it's sort of like, again, the term religious right. It's like,
Sure.
if somebody says, Joe, are you a member of the religious right? I don't even know what the heck that is.
And I don't either.
Conversion therapy is a deliberately negative, sinister sounding term
Yeah, I agree.
that either implies you're trying to force people to do something against their will or you've got some bizarre approach to it. It's
Sure.
like, yeah, come to my office and I'll give you electroshock therapy or I'll, give you weird drugs or do exotic things. All I do is offer biblical counsel on what to do or not do if you are attracted to the same sex, what your options are, how to explore those options, and how to do it responsibly.
Hmm.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Do you personally believe that a person with a homosexual same-sex desire can change?
Absolutely, I
Okay.
do, but we do have to define change. Let's qualify it because that could lead people to believe that, oh, if somebody's attracted to the same sex, Joe Dallas is saying, well, they can become attracted to the opposite sex to the same degree. I don't know that that's true. I mean, it varies from person to person. We can all change our behavior, Bill, and that's a major change, by the way. If the only change I made back in 1984 was behavioral, that would have been huge. And I would have been very happy with that because we can decide what to do and what not to do when we feel a desire. We can decide how to identify ourselves. We can decide how to relate. So everybody can change in their behavior and everybody can change in their identity, how they identify themselves, whether they identify by their feelings or by their broader belief system. To what extent someone will lose homosexual desire or gain heterosexual attraction, that varies from person to person. And I'll be the first to say, I don't know why. Just for example, I never tried to go straight. I only tried to abstain. That's all I tried to do. When I
Hmm.
repented, it was like, that's wrong. I'm going to stop and I'm sure I'll be a single Christian man for the rest of my life. Okay, fine. Now, I met my wife. I started talking to her. I liked her. The longer I talked to her, the more I realized I like her a lot. Then I realized, no, I don't just like her. I have a desire for her. I want to touch her. I want to be with her. I don't want to get weird here, but I mean, that's basically everything you think of when you think I was starting to become attracted to someone.
Sure.
And when I talked to Dave about that, he said, okay, look, don't try to make it happen, but don't try to prevent it either. If you find yourself being attracted to her, allow that to happen.
Hmm.
And I think that in some cases, people actually do have heterosexual response that they have inhibited by their own choices by saying gay is the only option I have. So if that response is there, I think it's possible that that response can be nurtured and allowed to grow. Now, that alone doesn't mean that homosexual desires will leave, because in my case, I noticed even when I was starting to feel specific desire for my wife, I still also dealt with temptations towards men. They were diminishing, though. And I found that the longer I resisted them, in my case, the more they diminished.
Hmm.
So where I am now, I'm, at 71 years old. Why, I do not feel conscious attractions towards men, but I'm pretty aware, Bill, that under the right circumstances I could. So I'm not completely beyond that. So that's where I landed. Now I know other men who have repented just as fervently as I did and sought help and support just as I did, and they found that they never became attracted to anyone of the opposite sex. And they lived their lives with integrity as single Christian men. Now, why did they land there and I landed here? I have no idea. The only thing I can get back to is at the end of John's gospel, when Jesus was talking to Peter and saying, follow me after the resurrection. And Peter looked over at John and said, what about him? And Jesus said, if it's my will for him to live until I come and for you to die earlier, what's it to you? Follow me. Now, this is a real important point, Bill. The call to all believers is universal. Follow me. The outcome varies from person to person. Some people who respond to that call will get married, some won't. Some will go on the mission field, some won't. Some will have strong attractions to the opposite sex, some won't, and everything in between. We don't get to second guess what the outcome will be. So, this is where I think we do need to be responsible when we're talking to people and they say, okay, I'm gay. What if I'm repentant? What if I seek God? What will the outcome be? We can say with integrity, you will be given all that you need to live a Christ centered life. You may become attracted to someone of the opposite sex and go into marriage. You may find that you are not attracted to anyone of the opposite sex and you will be given the grace and the strength you need to live a single life.
Hmm.
Either way, you seek God and let God be sovereign in your own life. And that way, we don't put demands on God. You're going to make me straight. But we also don't put limits to God. Oh, I could never be straight. Because we don't know, Bill. We really don't. And
Mm.
I think that's the most responsible and I think the most biblical way to approach it.
And the first thing I'm hearing, Joe, which I appreciate, is number one is obedience to Christ.
That's the point. I think if anybody says, well, I'm going to try counseling, not because I think homosexuality is a sin, but I just think it'd be nice to be married and have a family. Well, it's not a very good motivation. That's not what a disciple says.
Mm-hmm.
A disciple says, and I'm not patting myself on the back. Yeah, maybe I am. I don't know. But I said back in 1984, okay, Lord, I have sinned. I repent of that sin. Give me the grace to live an obedient life, come what may. And that's where you start. And then if you find that in living your life and interacting with people, you become attracted to someone of the opposite sex, praise God. If you find that you don't, but you are given what you need to live a fruitful and an abundant life as a single believer, praise God. Now, having said that, Bill, I do want to, I want to say this too. I think for most of us, our trajectory as humans is towards partnership. I do believe that. And I think that in most of the cases, I know people do find themselves drawn towards marriage. And I think that along with that, God does grant the capacity to respond to the opposite sex. But I don't want to come on here making sweeping promises. I just want to point out for most people, I think it's like Paul said, every man has his gift of God, one after this manner, another after that. For most people, I think that there is a trajectory towards, yes, I want to share my life with someone. I want a partner. I want to raise children. I want to have a family. And I think that most people I've known who have made the decision I've made actually have gone on to marriage. But what I don't want to do is say that is the standard that we should impose on people because we shouldn't. And that's why I always am cautious even giving my testimony like I just did because somewhere some well-meaning mother is saying, oh, if my son will only do what Joe Dallas did, God will bring him a wonderful Christian wife. You can't say that because you can't predict what God will or will not do.
Mm-hmm. Joe, what do you say about the sons and daughters of people who raised them in a beautiful Christian home and they understood they made a commitment to Christ, then they started expressing their same-sex attraction, and they are now not really going to church anymore and having arguments with their parents? And what do you say about that?
Oh, well, Bill, you just described hundreds, even thousands of Christian families right now as
I
we
know I
speak.
did.
It's happening everywhere. What I would say is this. Was your commitment to Christ the commitment of a disciple or was it not? Because if it's the commitment of a disciple, we don't commit to Christ because he's going to give us a wonderful life. We commit to him because having been born again, we realize sort of what Peter said, where else can I go? You alone have the words of eternal life. Discipleship, well, let me put it this way. Jesus would not have been a very good promotional man for discipleship, would he?
What do you
He
mean?
said, if anyone wants to come after me, great. Let him deny himself,
Oh,
take
right.
up his cross, follow me, die to himself. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's not good advertising, is it?
No, that's not.
But the point he made was, and it's very true, he said, if you seek to gain your life, you'll lose it. You lose your life, you gain it. You die to yourself and follow me, knowing that this world is not as it should be. So if you follow me, why is it so hard? Because following me is inherently so hard? No, what makes it hard is it means going against the grain of the world and against the grain of your own nature at times. And that's what makes it hard. And yet that is what discipleship is. And if we have that proper understanding, then I think our expectations will be adjusted accordingly. And that way, to my thinking, a true disciple would never say, well, I made a commitment to Christ, I've been following him, but I'm finding I'm attracted to the same sex, therefore I'm going to pursue that because I need to be who I am, and that's the way I feel I should express myself. Well, those are the words of somebody who's very self-aware, perhaps. But I don't think those are the words of a true disciple, because a true disciple would say, it's not enough to know what my sexual desires are. Now I need to know, are they within the will of God or not? Because if they are not within the will of God, no matter how deep they are, no matter how natural they are to me, I will not pursue them. That's what a disciple would say.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to biblical sexuality, Joe, there's so many people that have a desire to be loved in a way that God prohibits, whether you're straight or gay. I mean, this is nothing new.
Absolutely. How many Christian men or women have married and then 10 years after they married met someone and it's like, oh, I have met the other half of my own soul.
Right.
I have fallen in love. This is the most wonderful person in the world. I am happier when I'm with her than I've ever been with anyone in my life. My wife may be a great person, but this is the one that makes me whole. This must be God's will. No, it's not. But I understand it. I can be sympathetic, and we should be sympathetic. But what we can't do is decide that because that's what we want the most, that's where we find the most satisfaction, that therefore is what we must do, whether it's homosexuality or living with someone apart from marriage or having an adulterous relationship or even getting into a polygamous relationship. There are more and more people who are saying, hey, our three-way relationship is the most satisfying relationship I've ever had. You know what, Bill? I'm not going to challenge that. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. The question becomes, is it satisfying? Does that mean it's right?
Right.
Because a lot of things that we find satisfying are not in our own best interest, are they?
No.
I'll tell you one thing that is as satisfying to me, Bill, as anything on the planet Earth. A 5-course Mexican meal.
Uh-huh.
Start with the chips, and I'll take 2 baskets of those.
Okay.
Then bring on the burritos and the enchilada and the rice and the beans and the ice cream for dessert and everything in between, okay? Now, I just shoveled down tons of salt and grease and starch and carbs and calories. Sure felt good, but it wasn't in my own best interest.
Yeah, that's
Now,
true.
that's kind of facetious, but look, the principle is the same. Many things that people crave sexually, we can allow for the fact that they might be very gratifying to them if they indulge those things, but that doesn't mean that it's in their own best interest. God knew what he was doing when he said, Adam is alone. He needs partnership. And this is my solution to his need, a partner of the opposite sex in a monogamous relationship, which is permanent. That is the answer to the human need for sexual and emotional companionship.
Yes, it is. We'll take a break and be right back with Joe Dallas. You can go to joedallas.com to learn more about Joe. If you have a question or comment, we still have time. If you want to text it over, 877-933-2484. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. My guest is Joe Dallas. We're talking about his background in counseling for people with sexual issues, and he does an amazing job. You can learn more about him at joedallas.com. As we've been talking today about conversion therapy and having the counselor's ability to have these conversations with people who are wanting to have an open, honest discussion about the feelings they're having, their sexual feelings. And I'm curious, Joe, if you can shed some light on how this is going with churches and church leadership. This topic.
That is a good question. Yeah, because, Bill, people talk about conversion therapy bans as though they would only affect counselors. That's not true. Conversion therapy bans always apply to churches and mentors of any kind. So, for example, in Canada, where there's a nationwide ban on what they call conversion therapy, a pastor may not counsel a homosexual person the way I do. Yeah, that's against the law there.
Wow.
And that's not the only country, there are a number. In fact, in Malta, as we speak, a young man is facing a sentence that could include jail just for referring in a radio interview like this one to an organization that helped him when he was repenting of homosexuality. So Churches will be affected by this because when conversion therapy bans are in place, if a pastor says to a person who asks, hey, is gay good? Is this God's will? What should I do about it? If the pastor gives simple biblical advice, know that is a sin. I want to help you turn away from that sin, and I want you to live consistently with biblical standards. That alone would be a violation of the conversion therapy ban. So this has huge implications for religious freedom in America. And here's what scares me about all of this, Bill. It's as if we are letting the culture tell us, the church, which sins we may or may not speak against. And that means we will be giving the culture permission to basically become the light of the church.
Yes.
Rather than the church being the light of the world. Something's wrong with that picture.
Yeah, sure is. So counsel a parent or grandparent who is just now getting the news that their child or their grandchild has given them the news that they're in a same-sex relationship.
Well, you're going to have to first ascertain, of course, assuming that child or grandchild is an adult.
Yes.
Yeah. Do they hold a Christian worldview? Do they hold any particular worldview? If they are, as a secular person, or if they belong to a faith of some sort that condones homosexuality, then you're going to have to determine, okay, what is the primary need here? I want to keep my relationship with that person, but I also want to speak truth. But the main truth needed to speak is the gospel, not sexual standards.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody hasn't even been born again. The fact that they're gay is very secondary.
I agree.
I want to start with the gospel. What did Jesus say? What did he promise? Why do we need to take those promises seriously? Is this really a life or death issue? Then, if they have received Christ and they are operating with the Christian worldview, that's when you can appeal to that and say, well, now, wait a minute. How does this comport with what you believe as a born-again Christian? So we got to keep our priorities straight. A lot of people think that, oh my gosh, somebody just came out to me. How do I talk them into going straight? Well, even if you could, if they're still not born again, what did you accomplish? They're still dead. You want to start with the gospel. Have they or have they not been born again? That is the critical issue. Then and only then do you ask, if you have been born again, are you living your life in obedience to God's will? And how do we determine what God's will is? That's where the discussion needs to go.
Okay, a couple of minutes left. They say to you, well, I'm still going to church. I'm a gay Christian, and I go to a gay Christian-friendly church.
Okay. Then we want to ask, can we look at the scripture together and see what it does or does not say?
I like it.
Because what they're probably saying is, hey, the Bible doesn't condemn homosexuality. We mistranslated it. I would say, okay, let's go with that. Let's look at the original Greek. What words did Paul use in Romans 1, 1 Corinthians 6, 1 Timothy 1? What words did Moses use in writing Levitical codes? Let's look at the original Hebrew. Let's look at the original Greek, because a lot of people are saying, well, the original language doesn't condemn it, but they've never really checked it out, Bill. You know how that goes. A lot of people just repeat what they've heard.
That's exactly right.
You want to say, okay, hey, let's look at that then. If what you're saying is the Bible doesn't condemn it, let's look at your interpretation of the Bible and see if it holds up. In a lot of cases, the person will say, well, the Bible isn't meant to be taken literally. And then you say, okay, now you're basically saying that I will take the portions of the Bible that I find convenient, and those I don't, I will just say, well, those don't apply these days. Is that is that intellectual consistency and intellectual honesty to approach the document in that way? So you want to try to reason with them.
Yeah.
Apologize, I guess.
Yeah. Joe, is there anything going on in your ministry right now you would like us to be aware of?
I am especially excited, Bill, about a new pastor series I've done called Pastor, What About LGBTQ? It's a video series for pastors and church leaders to equip them in their local congregation as to how they can respond to this when it does come up in their church. And believe me, Bill, it will, if it hasn't already.
And is that series already available?
It's already available. They just go to my website, joedallas.com, and that'll direct them to it.
Okay. Always so informative when you come on, and getting some nice comments on the text line right now about our interview. I appreciate you, Joe, and thank you for your passion and your commitment to Scripture and your bold truth-telling. I appreciate it.
Hey, Bill, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks so much. Yep, Joe Dallas has been my guest. Go to joedallas.com. Learn more about Joe and all that is available at his website. There's a blog and counseling, and you can find out all kinds of things. That wraps up our show for the day and for the week. Thank you for supporting Faith Radio. See you next week. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.
There are moments in life when you don't know what comes next.
In one moment, everything changed.
Moments of loss.
My world, just everything starts falling apart.
Moments of fear.
I tried to slow down and I couldn't. I'm putting both feet on the brake pedal and nothing's happening.
Moments of doubt.
If you're real.
And in those moments, people discover something unexpected.
That's the moment that the color came back in the room. It was literally like a light switch went on.
On the Wow God Stories podcast, you'll hear true stories of real people.
We start spinning out of control and we start calling out on the Lord.
I owe him my very life.
And when we say Wow God, we're talking about the one true living God.
I just sensed God say, help this woman. And I just told her about Jesus.
Wow God Stories, wherever you get your podcasts.